Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. I am thrilled to have my good friend, Kay Lynn Mayhue, who is the president of Merit Financial, with us today. Welcome, Merit. Welcome, Kay Lynn. I almost said welcome, Merit. Welcome, Merit.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, it should be fun. Well, I'm in nice and cool Nantucket, and I know you're wherever you are is boiling because the rest of the United States.
Oh gosh. Yeah, Atlanta, nice, hot,
Atlanta,
hot
even
and humid.
yeah, even worse, right? Well, you and I have known each other for a long time, but I think it would be interesting to sort of talk a little bit about your origin story with everybody. I have a daughter who just started in our business, and I recommend she start as an assistant, sort of learn the CSA, get her licensing and everything, because it's a great place. But you started as an intern, right?
I've gone from flipping mattresses for the advisor that I was working for way back in the day to helping lead a 30 plus billion-dollar RIA. So it's absolutely been a journey.
Yeah, I'll say. Well, but that's what's so great about this country and this business too. You know what I mean? You can still, the things you do. It's you hear these stories. If you work hard, you'll succeed. If this happens, and this business is certainly one of those places where you can apply yourself and you can do better. Just you have yourself to blame at the end of the day.
Well, and I think now more so than ever. When I started in the business in the late 90s, it was really all about who you knew and how many, I can remember like how many people do you have in your Rolodex was one of the questions when I was interviewing with firms. So maybe there's a few of the listeners today that remember what a Rolodex is. And so now I think that there's so many entry points into the industry that it's not just can you make rain and can you bring in business, and I think that that's one of the things that we've really focused on, and I've noticed a trend around that institutionalization of the organic growth, so really putting the heavy lift of finding those prospective clients on the institution, the corporate
Yeah.
nucleus versus being that eat what you kill type mentality.
Well, I want to get there with you because I know you guys have done some good stuff around that. I think that's an interesting way to go, and of course, growth is something that's been hurting in our industry for a long time. But I want to say just back to the origin and how this grew. I mean, you were there startup to now scale, and I think it's interesting from a leadership point of view. How do you maintain culture at scale? All the things that were attractive to you in the beginning when you were a $2 billion firm or a $4 billion. I mean, things change. Your job changes. It's different to manage a $30 billion firm than 10, right? So staffing goes up. So how do you maintain the essence of what was great about the firm as it grows?
I think it's a really great question, and it's one that every time we talk to someone that's looking at joining Merit, that's one of the first questions that comes up. And I think the very first thing that you have to do is it's not something that you can delegate. This is not like we have a culture officer, but culture is everybody's responsibility. So I think it's having that mentality, but it all starts with people. So I think of culture as it's your core values and your mission as a verb. And so, do you have a team that's out there leading by example? So, our core values start with relationships. So, everything starts with relationship, whether that be the client or whether that be internally. And so, the first kind of rule of thumb is no jerks allowed, right? You don't want to be in a relationship with a jerk. And so, we have
Well,
a
and the other thing is, if somebody's a jerk, inevitably their clients are even bigger jerks. I mean,
there
you
you
you,
go.
you tend to attract people who are like you. Like my father was a dentist. I started out with dentists, right? Those are my those were my clients, like Italian dentists, to make it even worse, right? I just knew them, right? We familiar. So you end up with bad people if you hire bad people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all it takes is a couple of bad folks in the mix to
Yeah.
really be a cancer and run rampant through the organization. And so, have we made some mistakes along the way? I mean, sure, we have, but I think what we learned from those is we're super slow to hire, and we're also super slow on the M&A process. And so we do a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And so it's a long time, and it's very, very involved from a team perspective. There's a lot of collaboration when we're bringing on a new leader or we're bringing in a new firm to make sure that there's a good match there. So I think it starts with who you let in, and then that just mentality around whose responsibility is culture, everyone's.
Yeah, that due diligence approach, especially in regards to M&A, I mean, it saves you blood and treasure in the end,
A
the
hundred percent.
you put in. So that it does bring up another interesting point though. So you talked about M&A, one of the, and I know you're in the middle of this too, so want your perspective on it. One of the biggest issues facing advisors today is equity and what does it
Mhm.
mean, and challenges around PE. So you guys are doing it and been doing it successfully, and no jerks is certainly one thing, doing due diligence is another thing. But it's interesting, advisors aren't doing the due diligence that they should when they hear about these equity programs. Not the same due diligence they would do if it was for a client. If a client was saying, here's a stock recommendation, they would ask all kinds of questions, right? They would say, why are you doing this? Where's the money coming from? How's it work? Where are you in the cap table and stuff? But you kind of don't. You feel like the way the world is today. There's so many people in PE firms and different forms of financing offering equity, and you're one of the most experienced CEOs in this, right? So, how do you see it, and what are the challenges specifically that advisors are facing when they look at the current PE marketplace, which is really affecting our business?
It's a really important topic. And so when you think about it, the first off, go back 10 years ago, and the advisors, whether they're in an IBD space or a wirehouse or on the independent side, there really wasn't significant value in that client base or that business that they were building. This has really come up in the last decade, which is
Yeah.
great. I think it's really professionalized our industry. So I'm excited to see it. And it's like, finally, we're here. And so it's a great thing to have an asset, not just an income stream from the business now. So if you think about you've got equity in your own either client base through goodwill or your entity, if you've got an RIA or a DBA that you've got a entity with. So they're exchanging currency in a merger, right? And so you're taking something that you have control in, complete control in, and you're handing that baton over, that key over to someone else, to a larger institution. And so you'll have lots of emotions around that, but I think that your core question around the diligence process. So here's a couple of core questions that we answer out of the gate that even if they don't ask it, we're going to have in reverse diligence. So, just like you said, what is the cap table? Is it diverse, or do we have just a few people at the top that own a lion's share?
Right.
PE, you mentioned private equity. Like, are they minority capital or are they majority? What does
And then
who has control? Who's running the company? What do the bylaws look like? How's the company operating? What's the leverage? Those type of things are so critical.
and it's interesting. I know my opinion on this, but that we're sort of breaking down into good guys and bad guys in
Yeah.
private equity, right? So it was easy. You said 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was you versus the wirehouses. That was simple. This was,
Yep.
you want culture, or you don't. You want on the other side. They do a lot of things well, a lot of competencies around businesses and products and sophistication, but if you want a friend, get a dog. Well, to me, culture is important, right? So here I am on this side of the ball, and now it's more complicated because there's good PE that's helping, as you said, create value, enterprise value, and things that we never had before, right? But there's also bad PE because I just can tell from what you were saying and before that you're running into bad deals. I'm sure there are people coming to you saying, "Get me out of this thing," right? I was in a
Yeah.
bad one. So there's certainly bad equity, and how do advisors tell at this point? I mean, it's a sophisticated. They're in deep water with pretty big sharks at this point.
Well, Tony, I know that your audience consists of advisors at all different journeys and leaders of all different journeys. So there could be the folks that are looking at going direct and taking a direct investment. I would just say ask a lot of questions and then talk to the other leaders in the portfolio companies. I'll give you an example. We just went through a recap ourselves last year. We've got a minority capital partner. And as part of that journey, there were probably a handful or so of potential investors that funneled down to that like final
Yeah.
step. And so I had conversations with all of those CEOs of those firms. Sometimes it was outside of our industry, sometimes it was inside of our industry. And I asked one simple question. I said, tell me a time about a situation where you didn't see eye to eye with your outside investor, and how was it resolved? And how did you go about it? That's all I needed to know. I was able to eliminate two of those finalists just based upon the conversation. So just to your point, there's good and then there's bad. And everybody, maybe you want to have the prickly porcupine that you're interacting with on a daily basis, or maybe you want to have that. I look at it, it's kind of like, and I was in an advisor role for the first 20 or so years in the business and was running a smaller RIA. In that scenario, I was sitting down with a client that wanted help as far as they wanted advice. And I look at the right capital partner, the right investor, as that same thing. It's an advisor. It's someone to
Yeah.
help us see what's ahead, things that we might not be seeing, and help us get better.
A strategic partner with plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that, we've sort of, it feels like we're trading out, just to push this metaphor as far as we can, one set of bad guys for another, like we're trading out this, but they're coming up with the same controlling issues for advisors that the wirehouses had. We're going to tell, once you're in there and then they become majority, then they tell you what to invest in and tell you how to do it. And all of a sudden you're back to where we were, 20 years ago, and all the problems that created. So finding the right partner and working with a firm, I think, or somebody who's experienced in this would help advisors in
Yes.
this scenario.
Absolutely. You want to find it. It's the same thing around when we talk to someone that's thinking about joining us from a partnership standpoint, Tony, either from like they want to come in and lead. I think it goes down to that, is the client experience going to be enhanced and better? Like that's why we're in this business. Let's talk about the clients. It's
Right.
crazy that so many conversations take place and we're not focused on what that client experience is going to look like. So that needs to be the first question. And then you need to look around at your team. Is the team going to have better opportunity than they would have otherwise? Are we going to be able to bring resources to them that we weren't going to be able to bring? And so I think if you look in this M&A and investing world in the RIA space, those need to be the core questions that everybody is asking themselves. And if the answer is no to any of those along the way, then you should be walking away.
Yeah, good advice. So that obviously breeds anxiety too among advisors, and there's a lot to be anxious about, because the next thing that makes people anxious is AI, because
Yes.
there's so many unknowns around it. So let's talk a little bit. I mean, one of the reasons to join a firm and to not be your own separate RIA is to have somebody like you worrying about this instead of me, right? I want to do my business. You have to go out, Kay Lynn, and start vetting these things and figure out, what the next step are. And sometimes just one thing is, this is a great tool, but we don't even know what the next steps are. We're just trying to be open minded. So where are you guys with AI these days in your firm?
Well, I think that the world in which we live in is changing more rapidly than it ever has, which is just crazy to think about. Because I mean, you think about when I was in high school, there was no email addresses as examples. Like, I mean, so to think of how far we've come, and then just to think about how quickly it's changing and have that be even more rapid than where we've been is crazy. But I think from our standpoint, we're looking for AI to make us more efficient
Yeah, of
and
course.
to enhance the team experience. Right now, I would say it's less of a client touch at this point. I think that that's the next phase where we bring in that customization that I think the clients are becoming used to in other areas of their life. So let's just go back to that team experience. I'll give you a great example. Our compliance team used to have to go through and comb through thousands of emails. We've got almost almost 500 employees. And so you can imagine the number of emails that the team was
Yeah.
having to go through. Well, with some really great AI tools, that's down to hundreds. And I'm talking on an annual basis, which is just incredible. And so to have that type of efficiency where something was just mundane and unnecessary, I think that that's the low hanging fruit. I could also share a story. We had an advisor that lost a second share as far as that service advisor. That service advisor decided they wanted to go do something else with life. And this advisor was running a very large client base and had lots and lots of meetings. And so this was very disruptive. It
Yeah.
happened to be the month that we started working with one of the note takers. And so we happened to use Jump. And so that advisor hadn't yet implemented that. We brought that tool to him, and there was about 80% of what that service advisor was doing, which was taking notes in the meetings, sending follow-up emails, tasking out things that AI was basically able to jump in there and do. So now we replaced that position, but it was a higher level service advisor, someone that could really be an extension of the advisor relationship piece and not just that administrative side. So I would say we're all early on in this journey. I think that the advisors that are concerned about AI replacing them don't really get what our secret sauce is as advisors to the clients. And that's the relational side of things. That's the life coach. That's the let's take the emotion out of these decisions. I mean, AI can't do.
There's just like this earlier this week. There were earlier this week, it was yesterday, I guess, but the McKinsey study that talked about, I don't know if you saw that, but they were talking about the future of advisors. I don't agree with everything McKinsey says by any stretch, but they did hit on that theme that it's really going to be this emotional stuff that advisors are going to be most reliant on. Of course, you can't take emotions out of the market. That was a Ron Kruszewski thing. Markets are what they are. They're built by humans. So you can have all the AI on what's the best ETF or what's the best whatever, but there's humanity and emotions involved in all markets, and there's personal emotions. I have a child with special needs. I have this, I have that. That's going to be hard to sort of judge by a computer anyway. And finally, regulation, which is something that concerns me. I know we talked a little bit about this. I mean, if I'm Elizabeth Warren on a committee and you have this 401k and you ran it through AI, why do you get a commission? And conversely, I can hear the same set of facts, same Elizabeth Warren saying, you didn't run this through AI.
Right.
I mean, we have to be pretty flexible in where it's going, but my concern revolves around like what happened to us. We got caught flat-footed on texts. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So this is happening now. How do you run a firm and have some kind of guardrails, but still allow adoption of
Yeah.
new tools?
Well, and I think that one of the very important pieces of all of this is the cybersecurity side. So we've invested on the human side of cybersecurity, on the technology side, and the consultant side, realizing that that's our biggest risk. I mean, yeah, we've got market risk, but I mean that cybersecurity side, the RIAs that aren't taking this seriously, are really in for a rude
That's hard to do on your own. As you said, you ran a
it
small
is. It
RIA.
is. And
It's
you know what? That's actually really interesting, Tony, that you say that because I think that the business has gotten so complex. And I think that there's a number of conversations that we're having that I'm sure other of the integrators on the RIA side are having to where people are saying, time out. Like I can't keep up with all of this. Almost like the accidental business owners. They were such great advisors, but now they're actually running a business and it's just something that they're not getting enjoyment from, or it's just too much.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. You talk about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It was like let's everyone needs to be on their own, and now you're seeing the value of collective action, especially in this kind of thing. So we did talk about organic growth, and we're actually running out of time, believe it or not. But I just a little bit about what your firm does. I think it's a challenge in the industry, right? You find two things that are challenged or interrelated that I wanted to talk both about. You next gen stuff, right? So bringing new
Yeah.
people into the business. I know you've had a lot of success around that, which is again unique versus everybody else, but also growing your book. Advisors don't grow and they take a lot of credit for what the market has done. But when you look at like what they've done in terms of net bringing new people in, And as an industry, AI is a challenge in a lot of ways. It is. If you're not bringing in new clients, and I'm going to drift over to a non-human solution, maybe, so we need to bring people in.
Yeah. Hitting upon two things, which I think they go hand in hand. I'm going to go back to that institutionalization of organic growth. So,
Yeah.
what does that mean? That means the lion's share of the responsibility to do organic growth is on the headquarters, it's on the company. And so, what that means for us is we've established organic growth tracks that our advisors can plug into. Everything from like the custodial referral programs to partnering with banks to working with CPA firms to doing local events and virtual events to digital marketing. So it's not a one size fits all. You've got certain people that absolutely love presenting. So we take all the responsibility of getting the people in the room and then following up to get them on the calendar
Right.
for the individuals, but they're showing up and doing the presenting. That's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Maybe someone likes one-on-one, so it's better for them to work the custodial referral program where they're getting that warm introduction. And we've got that RVP that's handling the lion's share of that responsibility. So I think that's what it comes down to. But you mentioned that next gen. I do think that the next gen advisors aren't necessarily like the past. I mean, I can remember it was breakfast, lunch, dinner, cocktails, asked to speak at the Rotary, like being out every single birthday party. I mean, it's just like you were just out there with your network. And I think that the next gen, while there certain folks that exist that love that kind of stuff, I think we have really, really, really great advisors that we just need to get in front of the clients for a large majority of the advisor next gen population. And so we've taken the approach where we want them to have a path to success. And then you mentioned it earlier as far as equitization. About 85% of our advisors have meaningful equity. That's where you get that alignment, that behavior. So you put all of those things together, and I think that it's a great combination
Yeah, I think
for
that,
us.
well, I love that. There's certainly power in not being overly focused these days, especially when we don't know where things are going to end up, right? So you might as well.
Diversification, right? We
Yeah,
tell our clients to do it. And if you're only working in one organic growth channel that could have the rug pulled out from underneath you, or one client complaint, or whatever it might be, yeah, diversification is important.
that's great. Well, I'm going to leave it on that. That's a high note. It's great having you on the show, and we'll do it again. Follow up, see how you're doing.
Perfect. Tony, thanks so much.
Thank you.